The night was quiet on the old farm in Montana. The stars were bright and the air was cold. Laura sat on her porch with a cup of coffee in her hands. She was 42 years old and she lived alone. Her husband had left her 3 years ago and she never married again. The farm had belonged to her grandfather and now it was hers. She had horses and chickens and a dog named Blue. It was a simple life, but she liked it that way. Laura looked up at the sky and watched the stars. She did this every night before going to bed. It made her feel small but also peaceful. The universe was so big and her problems were so small when she thought about it that way. Then she saw something strange. A light appeared in the sky. It was not a star and it was not a plane. It was moving too fast and it was getting bigger. Laura stood up from her chair and watched. The light turned into a ball of fire that cut across the darkness like a knife. It made no sound at first, but then she heard it. A deep rumble that grew louder and louder until it shook the ground under her feet. The fireball crashed somewhere in the north field. The impact was so strong that Laura felt it in her chest. Her windows rattled and Blue started barking like crazy. The horses in the barn made scared noises and kicked at their stalls. Laura did not wait. She went inside and grabbed her rifle and a flashlight. She put on her boots and her jacket and walked out into the cold night. Blue wanted to come, but she told him to stay. She did not know what had fallen from the sky and she did not want her dog to get hurt. The walk to the north field took about 10 minutes. Laura could see smoke rising against the stars. The smell was strange. It was like burned metal and something else she could not name. Her heart was beating fast, but she kept walking. She had lived on this farm her whole life and she was not the kind of woman who ran away from things. The crater was bigger than she expected. It was about 30 feet wide and the ground around it was black and burned. In the middle of the crater sat something that made Laura stop and stare. It was a pod. That was the only word she could think of to describe it. It was black and smooth and shaped like a large egg. There were strange symbols on its surface that seemed to move when she looked at them. The metal was cracked in several places and some kind of steam was coming out of the cracks. Laura stood at the edge of the crater for a long time. She knew she should call someone, the police or the army or someone who would know what to do, but something kept her there. Something told her to wait and watch. Then she heard it. A sound came from inside the pod. It was small and high and desperate. It sounded like a baby animal crying for its mother. Laura had raised animals her whole life and she knew that sound. Something was alive in there and it was scared and alone. She climbed down into the crater. The ground was hot under her boots but not hot enough to burn. She walked up to the pod and put her hand on its surface. The metal was warm and it seemed to hum under her fingers. The crying sound came again, and this time it was louder. Laura found a crack in the pod that was big enough to fit her fingers. She grabbed the edge and pulled. The metal was strong, but it was already broken from the crash. She pulled harder and harder until her arms hurt. Finally, the crack opened wider with a loud groaning sound. Inside the pod, she saw something that changed her life forever. There were 3 small creatures lying on some kind of silver cloth. They were about the size of newborn puppies, and they were covered in soft fur that was gold and brown. Their faces looked a little like cats, but not exactly. They had big round eyes that were the color of honey and small pointed ears. Each one had a line of darker fur running down its back. When the light from her flashlight touched them, they opened their mouths and made tiny roars. It was the most beautiful and sad sound Laura had ever heard. They were bobbies, alien bobbies, and they were all alone. One of them, the smallest one, started crawling toward her. Its little legs were shaking and its eyes were wet. It reached her hand and pressed its tiny body against her palm. It was so warm and soft. Laura could feel it shaking with fear. She did not think about what she was doing. She did not think about the police or the army or what anyone would say. She reached into the pod and picked up all 3 bobbies. She held them against her chest and wrapped her jacket around them. They stopped crying and pressed closer to her warmth. Laura climbed out of the crater with the 3 alien bobbies in her arms. She walked back across the dark field toward her farmhouse. Blue was waiting for her on the porch, and when he saw her coming, he wagged his tail. He sniffed at the bundle in her arms and licked one of the little golden faces. The smallest baby made a soft purring sound. Laura went inside and closed the door. She sat down in her chair by the fire and looked at the 3 small creatures in her lap. They had fallen asleep against her chest. Their tiny chests moved up and down as they breathed. Their little paws twitched as they dreamed. She had never wanted children. That was one of the reasons her marriage had ended. Her husband wanted a family and she did not. But now she was holding 3 bobbies that had fallen from the stars, and something inside her had changed. She felt a need to protect them, to keep them safe, to love them. Laura did not know where they came from. She did not know what they were or why they had crashed on her farm. She did not know if their parents were looking for them or if they were all alone in the universe. She only knew one thing. They were hers now. She would figure out the rest later. For now she held them close and listened to their tiny breaths and watched the fire burn low in the fireplace. Outside, the crater still smoked under the cold stars. The pod sat broken and empty in the burned ground. But inside the old farmhouse, 3 small aliens slept in the arms of a woman who had just become their mother. Laura had no idea what tomorrow would bring. She had no idea how hard it would be to raise creatures from another world. She had no idea about the dangers and the secrets and the choices that waited for her. But she was not afraid. She had lived alone for 3 years and she had been lonely even if she did not admit it. Now she had something to care for, something to love, something that needed her. She looked down at the 3 sleeping bobbies and smiled. Whatever happened next, she would face it. She always had. The night grew quiet again. The stars watched from above. And somewhere out in the endless darkness of space, something was already moving toward Earth. Something that was looking for what Laura had found. But that was a problem for another day. Tonight she was just a woman holding 3 bobbies by a warm fire. Tonight she was a mother. The first week was the hardest thing Laura had ever done. The 3 alien bobbies needed food every few hours just like any newborn, but Laura did not know what they ate. She tried everything she could think of. She gave them cow milk, but they turned their faces away. She tried goat milk and they would not touch it. She made formula for human bobbies, but they spit it out. Laura was getting scared. The bobbies were getting weaker. They cried all the time and their golden fur was losing its shine. She stayed up all night holding them and trying to think of something that might work. On the 3rd day, she was making soup for herself when the smallest baby started sniffing the air. Its little nose twitched and it made a soft crying sound that was different from before. It sounded hungry in a new way. Laura dipped her finger in the chicken broth and held it out. The baby licked it and then grabbed her finger with its tiny paws and sucked on it. Its eyes went wide and it made a happy sound. She gave broth to all 3 of them. They drank it so fast that they almost choked. Laura mixed the broth with some scrambled eggs and they ate that too. It was not perfect, but it was something. The bobbies fell asleep with full bellies for the first time since she found them. After that, Laura learned more every day. The bobbies liked meat better than vegetables. They liked their food warm but not hot. They did not like being alone even for a few minutes. If Laura left the room, they would start crying until she came back. She gave them names based on how they acted. The biggest one was a female. She was always the first to try new things. She climbed out of the box Laura made for them before the others did. She explored every corner of the house. She was brave and curious and never seemed scared of anything. Laura named her Scout. The middle one was a male. He was calmer than the others. He liked to sit and watch things. He would stare at the fire for hours or look out the window at the birds. His eyes were always thinking about something. Laura named him Copper because his fur had more brown in it than the others. The smallest one was also female. She was the one who had crawled to Laura that first night. She was shy and sweet, and she did not like being away from Laura for even a moment. She would cry if Laura put her down. She would only sleep if she was pressed against Laura's chest where she could hear her heartbeat. Laura named her Ember because she was warm like a little fire. The bobbies grew fast. After 1 week they were twice as big. After 2 weeks they were the size of house cats. Their legs got stronger and they started walking around the house. They knocked things over and made messes everywhere. Laura had to move everything breakable to high shelves. Their roars got louder too. When they were small, their roars sounded like kitten meows. But as they grew, the roars got deeper and stronger. Scout could roar loud enough to rattle the dishes in the kitchen. Laura had to teach them to be quiet inside the house. They seemed to understand because they saved their loudest roars for when they were outside. Laura let them play in the fenced yard behind the house. She watched them run and jump and chase each other through the grass. They were so fast and so graceful. Sometimes they would try to catch birds, but the birds were always too quick. Ember would get sad when the birds flew away, and Laura would pick her up and hold her until she felt better. Blue the dog was confused at first. He would bark at the bobbies and they would roar back at him. But after a few days they became friends. Blue would let Scout pull on his ears and he would play chase with Copper in the yard. Ember liked to sleep curled up against Blue's warm side. Laura did not tell anyone about the bobbies. She knew what would happen if she did. The government would come and take them away. Scientists would put them in cages and study them like lab animals. Laura had seen movies about things like this. She knew how the story always went. The aliens were never treated kindly. They were always treated like things instead of living beings. These bobbies were not things. They were children, her children now, and she would not let anyone hurt them. But keeping the secret was hard. Her neighbor Gary came by one day to return a tool he had borrowed. Laura was in the kitchen and the bobbies were in the barn where she had made a bed for them out of old blankets. She thought they were safe, but Ember must have heard a stranger's voice because she let out a small growl. Gary stopped walking and looked toward the barn. He had a funny look on his face. Laura kept her voice calm. She told him it was just a stray dog she had found. She said the dog was scared of people, and that was why it growled. Gary nodded slowly, but he did not look like he believed her. He kept looking at the barn door like he wanted to open it and see for himself. After Gary left, Laura knew she had to be more careful. She started keeping the bobbies inside more. She only let them out at night when no one could see them. She put heavy curtains on all her windows so no one could look in. The bobbies did not understand why they had to hide. Scout especially did not like being kept inside. She would scratch at the door and roar softly. She wanted to run and explore. Laura felt bad for keeping them locked up, but she did not know what else to do. 1 month after the crash, Laura was watching the news on television. The bobbies were sleeping in a pile on the rug. The news was talking about strange lights that people had seen in the sky a few weeks ago. Scientists were saying it was just space rocks burning up in the air. Nothing to worry about. Laura looked at the 3 sleeping bobbies and knew that was not true. She wondered if there were other pods, other bobbies, other people who had found them. She wondered if those bobbies were safe or if the government had already taken them. She wondered if she was the only one who had kept her secret. The next day she went to the crash site for the first time since that night. The crater was still there, but the pod was gone. Someone had taken it. There were tire tracks in the dirt and boot prints all around. The government had been here. Laura felt cold fear in her chest. If they had found the pod, then they knew something had been inside it. They would be looking for whatever had survived the crash. They would be looking for her bobbies. She drove home as fast as she could. The bobbies were fine. They were playing in the living room and they ran to her when she came in. Scout rubbed against her legs. Copper touched her hand with his nose. Ember jumped into her arms and purred. Laura held them tight and made a promise. She would protect them no matter what. She would keep them safe no matter what she had to do. They were her family now, and no one was going to take them away. Outside, the sun was setting and the sky was turning orange and red. Somewhere out there, people were looking for the things that had fallen from space, but they would not find them here. Not today. Laura closed the curtains and locked the doors and sat down with her 3 alien children. Tomorrow would bring new problems, she knew that, but she would face them when they came. For now, she was just a mother keeping her Bobbies safe. And that was enough. The black cars came on a Tuesday morning. Laura was in the kitchen making breakfast when she saw them through the window. There were 3 big SUVs coming down the long dirt road that led to her farm. They were moving fast and kicking up clouds of dust behind them. Her heart stopped for a moment, then it started beating very fast. She ran to the living room where the Bobbies were playing. They had gotten big now. After 6 weeks, they were the size of medium dogs. Scout looked up at her with curious eyes. Copper stopped chewing on his toy. Ember ran to her and pressed against her legs. Laura picked up Ember and looked at the other 2. She told them to hide. She did not know if they understood her words, but they seemed to understand her fear. Scout and Copper ran to the back of the house where there was a small closet under the stairs. They had hidden there before when Gary came by. They knew what to do. Laura put Ember in the closet with her brother and sister. Ember did not want to go. She made a sad crying sound and tried to climb back into Laura's arms. Laura told her to be quiet and stay hidden. She told her she would come back soon. Then she closed the closet door and walked to the front porch. The SUVs had stopped in front of the house. Men in dark clothes were getting out. They had guns on their belts and serious looks on their faces. They spread out around the house like they were expecting trouble. A woman stepped out of the first car. She was tall and thin with dark hair that had some gray in it. She wore a gray suit that looked expensive. Her eyes were sharp and cold. She walked toward the porch like she owned the place. Laura stood with her arms crossed. She tried to look calm, but inside she was shaking. The woman stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. She looked at Laura for a moment without saying anything. Then she spoke. Her name was Cole. She was a director of something. She did not say what. She said she was with a part of the government that most people did not know about. She said she was there about what had fallen on Laura's farm 6 weeks ago. Laura said nothing. She just waited. Cole kept talking. She said they had found the pod. She said they knew something had been inside it. She said they had been looking for whatever had survived the crash for weeks now. They had finally tracked it here. Laura felt sick. She thought about the Bobbies hiding in the closet. She thought about what these people would do to them. She thought about running, but there was nowhere to go. Then Cole said something that surprised her. She said they were not there to take the Bobbies away. At least not yet. She said they needed Laura's help. Laura did not understand. She asked what Cole meant. Cole called to one of the men and he brought over a laptop computer. He opened it and turned the screen so Laura could see. There was a map on the screen with red dots all over it. Cole said each dot was a place where a pod had crashed. There were 47 pods. Most of them were empty. Some had equipment inside. 17 had Bobbies like the ones Laura had found. But most of those Bobbies had not survived. They died from their injuries or from stress or because no one knew how to take care of them. Laura felt tears in her eyes. She thought about 17 Bobbies dying alone and scared. It made her heart hurt. Cole said only 3 groups of Bobbies had survived the crash. 2 groups died later because the scientists did not know how to keep them alive. They tried everything but nothing worked. Laura's Bobbies were the only ones left. Cole said they had been watching Laura for 2 weeks. They had cameras in the sky that could see everything. They had watched her take care of the Bobbies. They had watched them grow strong and healthy. They had watched them play and eat and sleep. She said Laura had done something that the best scientists in the world could not do. She had kept the Bobbies alive. More than that, she had helped them grow. She had made them happy. Laura did not know what to say. She asked what Cole wanted from her. Cole said she wanted Laura to keep doing what she was doing. She said the government would give her help, food and medicine and protection. In return, Laura would let them visit sometimes. She would tell them what she learned about the Bobbies. She would help them understand these new creatures. Laura thought about it. She did not trust this woman. She did not trust the government. But she also knew she could not hide forever. The Bobbies were getting bigger every day. Soon they would be too big to keep secret. And if something went wrong and one of them got sick, she had no way to help them. She asked one question. She asked if the Bobbies would stay with her no matter what. Cole said yes. That was the plan. The Bobbies had bonded with Laura. Moving them now would probably kill them just like it had killed the others. Laura was their best chance to survive. Laura looked back at the house. She knew 3 scared Bobbies were hiding in a dark closet waiting for her. She knew she had to make a choice. She said yes. Cole nodded. She said her people would set up some equipment around the farm, cameras and sensors to watch for threats. She said a doctor would come by every week to check on the Bobbies. She said Laura would have a phone number to call if she ever needed anything. Then Cole asked to see them. Laura led her into the house and to the closet under the stairs. She opened the door slowly and spoke in a soft voice. She told the Bobbies it was okay. She told them to come out. Scout came out first because she was always the bravest. She looked at Cole and let out a low growl. Her golden fur stood up along her back. She did not like this stranger. Cole did not move. She did not look scared. She just watched. Copper came out next. He stayed close to Scout and watched Cole with his thinking eyes. He did not growl, but he did not come closer either. Ember came out last. She ran straight to Laura and jumped into her arms. She buried her face against Laura's neck and would not look at anyone. Cole looked at the 3 of them for a long time. Her cold eyes seemed to get a little warmer. She said they were beautiful. Laura held Ember tight and looked at this woman who had come to change her life. She did not know if she had made the right choice. She did not know if she could trust these people, but she knew she had to try. For the Bobbies, Cole left that afternoon. The men in dark clothes stayed behind to set up their equipment. They put cameras on poles around the farm. They put a satellite dish on the roof. They gave Laura a special phone that could reach them anywhere in the world. That night Laura sat on the porch with the 3 Bobbies around her. Scout was lying at her feet. Copper was sitting next to her chair. Ember was in her lap as always. The stars were bright above them. Somewhere out there was the place where these Bobbies had come from. Somewhere out there, their real parents might still be alive. Laura wondered if they would ever come looking for their children. She wondered what would happen if they did. She wondered if she would have to give them up. But that was a worry for another day. Tonight she had everything she needed right here on this old farm in Montana. She had her Bobbies, and they had her. That was all that mattered. 3 years went by faster than Laura thought possible. The Bobbies were not Bobbies anymore. They had grown into something amazing, something beautiful and powerful and strange. Laura watched them change day by day, and she was proud of every moment. Scout was the biggest. She was almost as large as a lion now, and her golden fur seemed to glow when the sun hit it. She had become the protector of the farm. Every morning she walked around the edges of the property looking for anything that might be a threat. Every evening she did the same thing. Her eyes were always watching and her ears were always listening. Her roar had become something incredible. When Scout roared, the windows of the house would shake. Birds would fly away from the trees. The horses in the barn would get nervous. But Scout did not roar often. She seemed to know how powerful she had become. She saved her biggest roars for greeting the sunrise. Copper had grown into a thoughtful creature. He was not as big as Scout, but he was smarter in some ways. He liked to figure things out. He was the first one to learn how to open the refrigerator door. He would pull the handle with his paw and look inside at all the food. Laura had to put a lock on it to keep him out. He was also the first to understand television. At first, he would try to catch the people on the screen. He would jump at the TV and get confused when his paws went right through the images. But after a while, he understood it was not real. He would sit and watch nature shows for hours. His favorite was anything about birds. Copper could not talk, but Laura knew he was trying to understand human language. He would watch her mouth when she spoke. He would tilt his head when she said certain words. Sometimes he would make sounds that almost sounded like words. Laura wondered if one day he might learn to speak. Ember was still the smallest of the three. She was about the size of a large dog. Her fur was the warmest gold color, and it was soft as silk. She had never lost her need to be close to Laura. Every night she slept curled up against Laura's back. Every morning she was there waiting when Laura woke up. Ember had learned to communicate in her own way. When she wanted to go outside, she would press her head against the door. When she was hungry, she would touch her nose to the cabinet where Laura kept the food. When she was happy, she would make a purring sound deep in her chest. Laura could feel the vibration through her whole body when Ember purred. The government scientists came every month. They took samples of fur and blood. They measured how big the children had grown. They asked Laura hundreds of questions about what they ate and how they slept and what they did all day. Laura did not like the scientists, but she put up with them. They kept their word. They never tried to take the children away. They gave Laura money for food and supplies. They sent a doctor whenever one of the children was sick. They kept their distance and let Laura raise her family in peace. 3 years of peace. Then the signal came. It happened on a clear night in October. Laura was sitting on the porch with Scout at her feet. Copper was watching the stars through the window. Ember was in Laura's lap purring softly. It was a normal night like any other. Then every phone and radio and television on Earth went crazy. Laura's special government phone started ringing. She answered it and heard Cole's voice. Cole sounded scared for the first time ever. She said to turn on the news right now. Laura went inside and turned on the television. Every channel was showing the same thing. Scientists in white coats were talking about a signal that had been picked up by telescopes all over the world. The signal had come from deep space. It was not random noise. It was a message. The symbols in the message were the same symbols that had been on the crashed pod. Laura felt cold all over. She looked at Scout and Copper and Ember. They were all watching the television with wide eyes. They seemed to know something important was happening. It took the scientists 2 days to figure out what the message said. When they announced the translation, Laura felt like the ground had fallen away under her feet. The message was simple. We are coming for our young. The whole world went crazy after that. People on the news talked about it all day and all night. Some people were scared and said we should give the aliens back before their parents came and attacked Earth. Some people were angry and said we should never give in to threats from space. Some people thought the whole thing was fake and did not believe it at all. The government called Laura. They asked her to bring the children to a secure location. They said it would be safer there. They said the whole world knew about the alien bobbies now, and people might try to come to the farm. Laura said no. She said the children would stay with her. She said this was their home. She said she was not going to lock them up in some government building like prisoners. If their real parents were coming, then they would wait here, together, as a family. Cole argued with her for a long time, but in the end Laura would not change her mind. The government sent soldiers to guard the farm instead. Men with guns stood at the end of the driveway all day and all night. Helicopters flew over the house. It was not peaceful anymore, but at least they were still home. Laura sat with her children that night and looked up at the stars. She wondered which star their real parents were coming from. She wondered how long until they arrived. She wondered what would happen when they got here. Scout pressed against her side. The big golden creature made a soft sound in her throat. It was not a roar. It was something gentler, something like a question. Laura put her arm around Scout's neck and held her close. She told Scout that whatever happened, she loved her. She said the same thing to Copper and Ember. She told them they were her children no matter where they came from. She told them she would never stop being their mother. Ember climbed into her lap even though she was too big for that now. She pressed her warm body against Laura's chest and purred. Copper came over and lay down at her feet. Scout stayed by her side like a guardian. They sat there together until the sun came up. The world was changing. Everything was different now. The secret was out and there was no going back. Strange beings from another planet were coming to Earth and no one knew what they wanted. But Laura was not afraid. She had raised 3 children from the stars. She had fed them and loved them and taught them how to live. She had been their mother for 3 years. Whatever was coming, she would face it with them. She looked at the sky one more time as the stars faded into morning light. Somewhere up there something was moving closer, something that had sent those bobbies to Earth, something that was now coming to find them. Laura did not know if they would be friends or enemies. She did not know if they would take her children away or let them stay. She did not know anything about what the future would bring. But she knew one thing for sure. She would not give up her family without a fight. Not now. Not ever. The ship arrived 6 months after the signal. Laura was standing on her porch when it came down through the clouds. It was early morning and the sky was pink and gold with sunrise. She had been waiting for this day. The whole world had been waiting. The ship was the biggest thing Laura had ever seen. It was miles long and it looked like it was made of light and metal mixed together. It moved slowly and silently through the air. It blocked out half the sky as it came down. It landed in the North Field, the same field where the pod had crashed 4 years ago. Laura watched it settle onto the ground like a bird folding its wings. The earth shook but nothing broke. The ship just sat there glowing softly in the morning light. Within hours, the farm was full of people. Government officials came from all over the world. Soldiers set up camps around the ship. Scientists brought machines and computers. News cameras pointed at everything. Cole came to Laura's house and told her what was going to happen. A group of diplomats would approach the ship and try to make contact. They would speak for all of humanity. They would try to find out what the aliens wanted. Laura listened, but she did not say much. She watched the ship through her window. Scout and Copper and Ember were watching it too. They had been restless all morning. They knew something important was coming. The diplomats approached the ship that afternoon. There were 10 of them from different countries. They wore fancy clothes and carried gifts. They walked across the field toward the ship like they were going to a meeting. The ship opened. A door appeared in the side that had not been there before. Light poured out and shapes moved in the light. The diplomats stopped walking. Some of them stepped back. The aliens came out. They were huge, 8 feet tall at least. They walked on 4 legs and their bodies were covered in golden fur just like Scout and Copper and Ember. Their faces were like bigger versions of the children's faces. Big amber eyes, pointed ears, long graceful bodies. They moved like cats, but they were as big as horses. There were 20 of them. They came out of the ship and formed a line. They looked at the diplomats with eyes that seemed older than the stars. The diplomats tried to speak. They said words of greeting and peace. They held out their gifts, but the aliens did not respond. They just looked at the humans like they were waiting for something. Then one of the aliens, the biggest one, turned her head toward the farmhouse. Her eyes found the window where Laura and her children were watching. She made a sound that carried across the field. It was not a roar. It was something else. A call. Scout heard it and her whole body went stiff. She opened her mouth and made the same sound back. Copper did too, and then Ember. The big alien called again. Cole came running to the house. She told Laura the aliens wanted to see the children. She said the diplomats could not get them to talk. She said maybe the children could help. Laura did not want to go. She was scared. But she looked at Scout and saw something in those golden eyes. Scout wanted to go. She needed to go. She was feeling something Laura could not understand. Laura opened the door. Scout walked out first. She moved slowly across the porch and down the steps. Then she started walking toward the ship. Copper followed her. Ember looked back at Laura once and then she followed too. Laura went after them. They walked across the field together, Laura and her 3 children. The soldiers watched but did not stop them. The diplomats moved out of the way. The cameras caught everything. The big alien watched them come. Her eyes moved from Scout to Copper to Ember. Then they moved to Laura. The alien's face changed in some way that was hard to describe. It was like surprise and confusion and something else all mixed together. Laura stopped a few feet away from the alien. Her heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. Scout stood on her right, Copper on her left. Ember pressed against her leg. The alien spoke. The words were strange sounds that Laura did not understand. But then a machine that one of the scientists had brought started working. It translated the words into English. The alien said one thing. "You saved them." Laura's voice shook when she answered. She said no. She said she raised them. She said they were her family. The alien was quiet for a long time. Then she spoke again. She said her name was something that sounded like. She said her people were called the. She said their world had been dying for a long time. Their sun was getting too hot. Everything was burning. They could not save everyone. They did not have enough ships, so they made a choice. They put their children in pods and sent them to the stars. They hoped someone would find them. They hoped someone would care for them until they could find a new home. Laura felt tears on her face. She thought about those pods flying through space. She thought about Bobby's alone in the dark. She thought about the ones who did not survive. Said they had tracked the pods across the galaxy. Most of them had landed on dead worlds. Some had landed on worlds where the people were cruel. Those children had died. But 3 children had landed here, on Earth, in a field in Montana. And a human had found them. A human had heard their cries and opened the pod. A human had raised them as her own. Looked at Laura with those ancient amber eyes. She said they had met many species in their travels across space. Some were smart, some were strong, some were dangerous. But they had never met a species like humans. A species that would take in lost children from another world and love them like their own. Bowed her great head to Laura. It was a gesture of respect, of thanks. The other bowed too. Laura did not know what to say. She looked at Scout, who was watching with wonder in her eyes. She looked at Copper, who seemed to be understanding something important. She looked at Ember, who was still pressed against her leg but no longer shaking. She asked what would happen now. She asked if they would take her children away. Was quiet for a moment, then she said no. She said the children had bonded with Laura. They had become her family. Taking them away would hurt them. They did not want that. They had sent their children to the stars hoping they would find love, and they had. But said they would stay for a while. They had nowhere else to go. Their old home was gone. They were looking for a new place to live. Maybe Earth could be that place. Maybe humans and could learn to live together. Laura thought about everything that had happened. She thought about the night she heard tiny roars coming from a crashed pod. She thought about the choice she made to open it. She thought about 3 years of feeding and loving and raising 3 children from the stars. She had never planned any of it. She had just done what felt right. She looked at and said yes. She said humans and could try to live together. It would not be easy. There would be problems and fights and misunderstandings, but it was worth trying. Because that is what humans did. They tried. Ember finally moved away from Laura's leg. She walked slowly toward. The big lowered her head to look at the small one. Ember touched her nose to his face, made a soft purring sound, just like Ember did when she was happy. Scout and Copper joined their sister. The four stood together for a moment. Then Scout turned and came back to Laura. She pressed her head against Laura's chest. She was saying something without words. She was saying that was family now too, but Laura was still her mother. That would never change. Laura put her arms around Scout's neck and held her tight. The negotiations would take years. There would be protests and problems and moments when everything seemed broken. But there would also be moments of hope, humans and learning from each other, growing together, building something new. And at the center of it all was a farm in Montana, a woman who had never wanted children, and three beings from another world who had made her a mother. Laura did not set out to change the world. She just heard tiny roars and opened a crashed pod. She just did what any good person would do. She helped. And in doing that simple thing, she showed the universe what humanity could be. Not perfect, not always kind, but capable of love, capable of compassion, capable of taking in lost children and making them family. That was the story that spread across the stars. The story of a species that found alien bobbies and raised them with love. The story of humans. The story of Laura and her three children. The story of how a mother's love became the bridge between two worlds. And that story would be remembered for as long as stars burned in the sky. The end.